Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be introducing to you a new concept of investing and borrowing money. It's called annuity. Now annuity, we use it as a platform of borrowing or investing money. Now this is the case when we invest or borrow regular contributions or the regular amounts. So here we're going to be specifically focusing on investments, where you invest a certain money every period and we aim to get interest on top of that. So what we get in return is actually more than what we put in. That's the idea of investment, isn't it? Now annuity gives us the easy calculations and methodologies for that investment. Now have a look over here, guys. I'll just read you this brief example, description. It says annuity is a form of investment that involves the regular contribution of money. Now the key part here is that it's regular contribution of money. So basically if you start earning money or you start getting a job and you earn enough money, you don't actually want to use all that up, do you? You actually want to save. Most people do want to save, don't they? And save up for something for good in the future. So say for example, I want to contribute say $100 every month. I'm going to put $100 every month into an account, investment account, and aim to get interest on top of that. And so that amount I invested actually increased to a certain interest rate. That's what annuity system is all about. Now one key thing here is that when you invest your money, it's always at the end of the period. Okay, so you don't put it in the, so say if you're going monthly, you don't pay it at the beginning of the month, you always need to pay at the end of every month. Now this regular contribution might not be monthly, it could be fortnightly, weekly, yearly, it really depends on your situation. So that's the idea. Now have a look at this quick little diagram here. I don't know if you can see it carefully, but see how if let's just say, use a quick example of going monthly. Say if I invest this amount per month. Now if you pay another month in the next period, we assume that it's just going to be doubling, right? But see how that amount of money the next month actually a little bit more? That's because of interest. So remember how our compound interest formula shows us how our investment increases in the rate of that interest rate because we power it to the period, don't we? Now it's kind of similar concept. When we invest, put in a certain money, we get interest on top of that. We put in more money and then we get more interest on top of that. So it's kind of like an exponential growth rather than just a straight line growth. Remember how when I did the reducing balance loan, we don't use the straight line reducing balance. So it's always quite curved, isn't it? That's because of the interest that's accumulated. All right? So hopefully this kind of concept is getting familiar for you. That's what we're going to be looking at in annuity, and I'll show you how the whole system works very easily in the next example. So watch. Now this example says $1,000 is invested at the end of each year for 3 years at 10% per annum compound interest commencing from 2011. So I've made up a little table here. This is very, very useful. So even if you're not given this in your exam, you might as well just build it up and just fill it in. It's really, really helpful. So what I have is the end of the year, the interest from the balance, so how much interest we get once we put in a contribution, deposit that we make, so deposit is like the contribution, how much we pay regularly, and the balance is what I have in my account at the end. So have a look, guys. It says commencing from 2011, so we're going to be starting from 2011, right? So end of year in 2010 we don't have anything, we start with $0. That's our balance in the end of 2010. Now we have $0, so in 2011 we're just going to be starting with $0. So first of all, $0, we times it by the 0.1, which is 10% interest. See how they give us the 10% interest rate? We need to calculate the interest. So we multiply 0, which is our balance, which is nothing. So our multiplication will just become 0. So that's what we're going to be putting there. We have nothing at the beginning of 2011 because I haven't invested anything in the previous period. So we start off with 0, and then now end of each year, remember how I told you the contribution or deposit or payment or whatever you want to call it, it's always should be done at the end of each period. So that's why it's the deposit at the end of the year. So at the end of 2011, I'm going to be making a payment of $1,000. See how it says $1,000 is invested at the end of each year? So that's what it is. That's the first deposit at the end of 2011. Now the balance will simply be our interest plus the deposit, isn't it? So we have to add it up to get the balance. But this time the interest was zero. We didn't get any interest because we didn't start with anything. So the balance is simply just $1,000. All right? But now, see what happens now, guys. Now in our account, we have some money. So that amount, we have to get the interest for the next period, don't we? So what we do is find the interest by multiplying it by our 10%. We always multiply the interest by the balance that we have from the previous year or previous period. So multiply it together, you should get $100. So this time we do get some interest. Our interest is going to be $100 that we get at the beginning of 2012. Now, it's come to the end of 2012, we need to make another investment. And it says $1,000 is invested every year. So again, another $1,000 is invested. That's a second deposit. Now again, the balance, we simply have to add on what we invested onto our interest and on top of the balance we had initially. So we must add all three. So we've got some interest, we've added a deposit, and in our account originally we had that much left. So we add it on top and then calculate it all together. That's what you should have. Put it into our balance at the end of 2012. So that's what we do. Now, because that's our balance at the end of 2012, in the beginning of 2013, we have to add some interest. So let's calculate the interest by this time multiplying the 10% by the balance left from 2012 and calculate it. That's our interest. That's how much interest we get at the beginning of 2013. Now, it's come to the end of year 2013, we have to make another investment of $1,000. That's our third deposit. Now again, we need to find the final balance. So we've got some interest, we made an investment of $1,000, but in our account, we had this much still left in it, isn't it? So we add all three, and that's how much balance we have. So put it in, that's the balance. So see, we started off with $0 and we invested $1,000 each year over a 3-year period. But see, we've invested $3,000 altogether, haven't we? But what we have eventually at the end, we have a little bit more than $3,000 because we've got interest accumulated. So that's a really good scheme, isn't it? So we get a return of more money. That's the idea, guys. That's a little example there. It's not too hard, is it? It's a repetitive pattern. So let's try question 1. Question 1, $5,000 is invested at the end of each year for 3 years at 5% per annum compound interest, commencing from 2008. Construct a table. So it's exactly the same as the previous example. Let's try it. So because it's commencing from 2008, we're going to assume that there was nothing in the account in the previous year. So $0 is the balance that we start off with. So to get the interest in the beginning of 2008, we simply multiply our balance by our 5%. So calculate it, we get 0. So $0 is our interest at the beginning of 2008 because there was no balance at the previous period. Now we've come to the end of the year and we have to make an investment. Investment is always going to be $5,000. That's going to be our first deposit or first contribution. So now we have to add it to our interest that we've obtained, which is just $0. We've obtained nothing, no interest. So calculate it, we're simply left with $5,000. That's what's going to be our balance at the end of 2008. So we haven't made any interest, so it's exactly the same as the investment. Now in the beginning of 2009, we're going to multiply the balance from 2008 with our 5%. So we get $250. So $250 is going to be our interest that we've obtained for 2009. So you can see that because we've made some deposit and because our balance for the previous year has some money, we've got some interest. Now it's come to the end of 2009, we have to make our usual contribution of $5,000. That's going to be our second deposit. Now, to get the balance, we need to add on the balance that we had in the account initially in the previous period, as well as the interest obtained, as well as our new contribution. So we add all three together. Make sure you add all of it with the balance as well, and you get that. So that's going to be our balance at the end of 2009, right? So we add on our interest as well as our contribution on top of the balance of the previous period. Now let's calculate the interest for 2010. So we calculate interest on our previous balance, don't we? So we times it by 5%, get that, that's what you put it in. Now we've come to the end of the year, we put in our last deposit, our third deposit of $5,000. Yeah, and then now we have to find the last balance of 2010, and all you need to do is on top of the amount that I had in the account, we add on our interest as well as our deposit, just like that. So on top of the balance that we had in 2009, we add on the interest that we've obtained as well as our new contribution of the last payment. So you calculate it, that's what you have. That's what you put into the last box. That's the balance at the end of 2010. So you can see that that is built up from our 3 investments of $5,000 and was bigger than the investment because of that interest component. That's the idea of annuity, so make sure you understood the concept.